Hello, welcome to the FanDuel Punch Out. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Josh Shepardson at BChad50. And we've got an interesting slate tonight. We've got a good pitcher pitching in Coors Field. We also have a bad pitcher pitching in Coors Field. A couple other interesting options. Also, Chris Sale Day today against Cleveland, who was shut out over a complete game by Jose Quintana last night. So Chris Sale ownership, as if it wasn't already going to be fairly high, might get a little bump after seeing a lefty dominate this team yesterday. So we'll start off with him. Obviously, Chris Sale, of all these pitchers, has the highest ceiling, and I don't even think it's particularly close. Maybe Carrasco's in the same ballpark, but, I mean, probably not. Chris Sale's $11,800. Like we said, the Indians, very lefty-heavy. They don't even really have righties they could put in the lineup to try to mitigate Chris Sale's dominance against lefties. So it's he's going to have a good performance tonight. It's just whether or not you can fit him in with the bats that you want.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're constructing a lineup here on FanDuel, it is tough to get any of the Coors exposure with Sale. You get a few guys in. I mean, we'll touch on a few of the cheaper ones later, but you're kind of, and this is how I feel like pricing should be on some nights. You shouldn't be able to get your ace and every piece of the game that you like the most. You should have to pick, and that's the case tonight. Either you get Sale or you get a lot of Coors, and you don't get both. But Sale makes for a strong cash games play. I think he makes for a stronger GPP option because that ceiling is so high, and if Coors doesn't go crazy, that's where you're going to gain an edge, is by running Sale out there and getting some bats in other games that fare well. I do think you have some alternatives in cash games so that you can spend up at Coors Field. But I do think that given yesterday's performance, Sale's ownership is going to be through the roof after watching Quintana mow down the Indians. But I'm of the belief that Carlos Carrasco is not a bad cash game swerve. And you don't usually think of swerves in cash games, but saving $2,500, the White Sox are not a particularly good lineup. Yes, they did get to Corey Kluber a bit yesterday. I mean, 6 earned runs is certainly no small feat, but Carrasco's been very good this year. Finally, his ERA is under 4, and it's catching up to the xFIP and the FIP and the Sierra that he's posted that have been great all year. Big strikeout upside, double-digit point score routinely of late, and he's a guy with 20-point upside. I mean, you'd need the win for that, which means most likely that he'd have to go deep and that Sale would have to hand the ball off to the bullpen early. But, I mean, if Sale has one of these 12 strikeout performances, maybe he runs his pitch count up a little bit early. Maybe you get to the Sox bullpen a little bit early just based on the high pitch count. But a lot of wishful thinking. But in terms of even without the W, Carrasco can return value on his $9,300 price tag. And at $2,500 cheaper, you can get some of those bats at Coors Field or elsewhere if you like another high total.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that both sides of that game, like you said, are good options. Carlos Martinez is another one, $9,900 against Atlanta. Obviously, we know how bad this Atlanta offense is without Freddie Freeman. So Martinez is a guy was bad in his last start. Big disappointment against the Mets right before the break. But he's a guy that has been pretty consistent. I mean, he gets you 12 to 17 FanDuel points pretty much every time out. So I think he's a fine option. But then there's two middle guys that I'm looking at here. Hector Santiago, $7,800 against Texas. Not a household name, but a guy who's been really good this season. His ERA is only 2.3, and this is obviously a lefty-dominant lineup in Texas. And this is a guy who's been very, very good against lefties. 229 WOBA allowed. Lefties batting 186 off in this season. So at $7,800, he had a start against him 3 starts ago in Texas. Just 3 Ks, but went 7 innings, got the win. He's got 12, 14, 17, and 18 fantasy points his last 4 starts. I don't mind going with Hector Santiago in cash games tonight so I can get some big bats.
Yeah, I mean, with so many good left-handed bats in that Rangers lineup, their best bats really left-handed. Anytime you can get a lefty that can tie up lefties, they're certainly worth some consideration, and Santiago fits that bill. Another lefty that I like, at least in GPPs, he's an underdog. I don't like him in cash games. But Gio Gonzalez gets a Pirates squad that does strike out a bit against left-handed pitching and hasn't been very good this year. They did add longtime lefty killer Aramis Ramirez, who should be in the lineup today. Aramis having a bad year against lefties, but chalk that up mostly to bad BABIP His play discipline's been fine, not striking out a ton. So not a great matchup for Gio, but there is strikeout upside there, especially if he can navigate a handful of pitfalls there in that lineup, namely McCutchen and Marte. But don't mind him. Another GPP option I'm looking at in that middle tier where you've got Santiago and another name that you're going to talk about here in a second. I like Ian Kennedy. He's at home. He's been far from brilliant this year. His ERA is almost 5, but decent strikeout rate still, and he's facing just a punchless Marlins squad. Anytime you can get the Marlins without Giancarlo Stanton at this point, it's enticing. And at $7,500, all Kennedy has to do is give you a quality start, and he's going to deliver on that $7,500 price tag. So I do think that that's within reach. He's opposing David Phelps, so he's not facing like a world beater pitcher that should keep his poor offense in check. But he is also a betting favorite at -142 according to Pinnacle. So a bit working in Kennedy's favor. I don't expect a huge showing from him, but at 7,500, you don't need a huge showing from him.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, and he's a guy who's got some pedigree, and we've seen him be successful before. His only struggles with the long ball, and obviously it helps being in a big ballpark. So, one other guy I'm considering, Taylor Youngman, $7,400, going to Arizona. This is a guy that's quietly been really good over his last couple starts. 8 innings against the Reds. Complete game, 7 strikeouts against the Dodgers. Next game, 7 innings, 5 Ks against Pittsburgh. 15, 19, and 15 fantasy points in that span. Going against an Arizona offense that obviously in Chase Field is dangerous, but only an 8-run total here. They are better against left-handed pitching. And, I mean, this guy, he has some struggles with walks, a little bit, right around 8% on the season. So you don't like that. His strikeout rate isn't great, 18.8%. But you love his 53.7% ground ball rate, 0.34 home runs per 9. So he's not giving up a lot of hard contact, keeping the ball on the ground. And that's what you're looking for in a place like Chase Field, especially when you need a middling option. And it's very close to a pick 'em. He's a small favorite against Ruby De La Rosa. And I do think that Milwaukee scores some runs, especially the lefties tonight, to give him some support.
Yeah, and I mean, Youngman's posted a 3.21 FIP and a 3.88 xFIP. Those are rock solid numbers. If he continues to have some good fortune on his fly balls, I mean, 3.21 FIP, you take that every day of the week.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's move on here to catcher, where it's not pretty tonight. There's not a lot of catchers to really jump off the page. You get Nick Hundley, who's in Coors Field, but he's against Johnny Cueto, so a guy who is a good hitter at Coors, but also just not a great hitter overall. Tough matchup. I mean, you can play him, of course, because it's in Coors Field, but for me, I'm not paying up for him. I'll give you the cheap option that you and I are looking at, and I'm sure most people are looking at. Sal Perez, and a righty-righty. Been much better against righties than lefties this year. And Scott Feldman has not been good against righties this year. Well, really in general, ever. But 369 WOBA allowed. $2,300 for Sal Perez. He just makes a lot of sense as a punt play, so you can get some of these other big bats at other positions, because this is not a particularly good position tonight.
No, catcher really stinks. Some of the big names are not playing on the late slate. Guys like Buster Posey, Stephen Vogt, they're not in the player pool because they're playing in the afternoon games. The one big name I would consider paying up for is Evan Gattis at $3,400, and the reason you'd be willing to do that is because he has big power, and if you're looking to pay up, you better be chasing big power, big speed, and catcher's certainly not a position for the fleet of foot. So grabbing Evan Gattis against the lefty, Danny Duffy, does make some sense if you're looking for some GPP separation at the position, because it is going to be such a popular position to punt tonight. But beyond that, there's just not a lot to like. Both of the Reds catchers struggle with left-handed pitching, so I think you're going to see some people use them because they're at Coors Field, whichever one's starting. But that's not a route that I'm looking to go.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing you could really consider at catcher if you're going to look for a punt play is whichever one of the Minnesota guys is in, but you don't really like Eric Fryer. You don't really like Kurt Suzuki. Neither guy has upside, but their min salary against CC Sabathia, who has been horrible against righties, 393 WOBA odds. So if you're just looking for a cash game, I guess a guy like Suzuki is not a bad way to go, but I'd rather pay an extra 100 and get some power with Sal Perez.
Same here.
All right, first base. For once, there's a lot of big names here, but not very many of them in good situations tonight. You have Paul Goldschmidt going against Taylor Youngman, who we mentioned has actually been pretty good recently. He's actually been very good against right-handed batters. 234 WOBA allowed so far in the season. So Goldie, tournament only option. Votto is lefty-lefty, but he's in Coors Field, and he does hit lefties well. So he's an interesting guy, but probably more of a tournament option for that. So for me, if I'm paying up, I'm going with Adam Lind at $4,100 in the desert against Ruby De La Rosa, who, as we know, great against righties, but horrible against lefties. 16 home runs allowed and a 413 WOBA so far this season. 21 walks to 37 strikeouts. This guy is just lost against left-handed batters. So if I'm paying up, it's going to be in a hitter's park with a lefty against a guy who struggles with lefties.
Yeah, I agree. Ruby De La Rosa, 386 WOBA allowed to left-handed batters since 2013. So it's not just an isolated one-year thing where maybe you chalk it up to just a bad string of starts. He just has never been good against left-handed batters. So Lind is that big-ticket item that you can pay up for. I think if you want to go contrarian, grab Adrian Gonzalez for $3,700 against Matt Harvey. Harvey been a little dicey lately, walking batters of late. He's got 13 walks in his last 3 starts combined. Just not the Matt Harvey that we're used to seeing dominate. So I don't mind grabbing a few Dodgers hitters. I think that's a contrarian way to go since people do still want to hop on Harvey. They like the Dark Knight. But Gonzalez, 3,700, big power. Don't mind using him. Speaking of big power, GPP option that I like tonight is Chris Carter against Danny Duffy. Assuming he is back in the lineup. He was off last night. Most likely that was more to do with facing a right-handed pitcher than his recent injuries. He had been playing frequently before that, but I do like Carter against Duffy at $3,200. A lot of people are going to turn their nose up to that price. Does have big power. Eric Hosmer at 29 looks pretty good against Scott Feldman. So does teammate Kendrys Morales at 27. And then the only other names that I'm looking at are Justin Bour at 2,600 and Ben Paulson just to get Coors Field exposure. You don't love the matchup with Johnny Cueto. You don't love the lineup spot. But 2,500, we know that Cueto's coming off of 2 down starts. His last start really messy. He walked 6 batters. So if something's not right there with Cueto, Coors Field really not the place to figure out what's not right, basically.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we'll see, and it probably his last start in a Reds uniform also. So he's more likely getting shipped. I'm guessing Kansas City. That's what I've been hearing, but either way, we'll see. Second base options. Brian Dozier is going to be your chalk play at $3,700 against CC Sabathia. I already mentioned his numbers against righties; they are not pretty. Add in the fact that Dozier kills lefties, and he's your obvious play there. Other options, I really like Jose Altuve, of course, against the lefty. He's $1,100 more than Dozier. I think his ownership will be way lower than it rightfully should tonight against Danny Duffy, who also struggles with right-handed batters. So I think he's your swerve tonight. And then, once again, Brandon Phillips, Ivan DeJesus, if one or both, you assume Phillips will certainly be in the lineup, but DeJesus, if he gets another start for some reason, both those guys in Coors Field against Chris Rusin are not bad options.
Yeah, another option that I'm looking at is Scooter Gennett in the desert. $3,000. We've already beat the drum for Ruby De La Rosa's struggles against left-handed batters, and Gennett certainly offers a left-handed batter that's cheaper than Dozier. So if you're looking for a cheap pivot, instead of paying up that extra $1,100 to Altuve, I do like Gennett, especially if he happens to get a promotion in that lineup. We have seen him at times throughout his career hit as a table setter, hit second for the club. So don't know as though I'd expect that tonight, but it would certainly be something that would help his value if he were to move up in the lineup, if they were to take advantage of De La Rosa's struggles against left-handed batters and construct the lineup that way. But that's more wishful thinking than anything, and this is not a position that I'm looking to punt at tonight. The only other option I'm looking at is another $3,000 option, and that's Colton Wong against Shelby Miller. Leadoff hitter who hits better against righties than lefties, and we know Miller much tougher on righties than lefties. So things working out favorably there, and we've touched on cheap options at catcher and first base. Don't skimp a second base. There's not something in that punt bin that even looks good tonight to me.
No, not at all. Speaking of not looking good in the punt bin, third base has a lot of big top options as well. Todd Frazier leading the way at $4,900 against the lefty in Coors Field. I mean, we could go on all day about how good of a matchup this is for Frazier, so you got to like that. Arenado once again gets Cueto, but maybe there's something up. Maybe there isn't. Either way, he's been hitting righties really well this year, so you got to like him. And then looking at the Minnesota team here, Trevor Plouffe and Miguel Sano. Sano specifically at $2,500 is going to be a popular play tonight, and rightfully so. And then Plouffe's at 31. And there's one other guy, Justin Turner, that I like in tournaments. Matt Harvey, you mentioned the walks. You mentioned his recent struggles. He hasn't looked certainly like an ace. I mean, he hasn't even looked like a very good pitcher at times recently. So Justin Turner, a guy that's really mashing the ball right now. Homers in 2 of his last 3 games. Had a homer and 2 doubles last night. So if you're not playing Matt Harvey, which I am not, I'll get myself some Justin Turner in GPPs.
I'm also a fan of a guy just $200 more than him. The next guy on that list, A-Rod, gets Tommy Malone today. A-Rod's been better against lefties than righties this year. I mean, he's hammered everybody, so it doesn't really matter, but has actually hammered lefties to a slightly higher degree than righties this year. Aramis, I noted earlier in the podcast that he should be in the lineup for the Pirates today. Conveniently managed to take a little bit longer to get ready and avoid Max Scherzer yesterday. Looking at Gio Gonzalez, a lefty today. Not bad WRC plus, bad WOBA this year, but the plate discipline's there, contact rate's there. Nothing to really worry about. I do expect Aramis to turn it around against lefties this year. And at $3,300, I don't expect him to be high owned. But his teammate Jung-Ho Kang is a guy that I like as well. Typically shortstop eligible, third base eligible now on FanDuel. At $3,000, I think he's going to be overlooked because he no longer has that SS next to his name. But we're talking about a guy that's got multiple hits, 2 hits in 6 straight games, really locked in with everyday playing time. I mean, he was getting semi-regular at-bats when everybody was healthy, but with Harrison on the shelf and Mercer on the shelf, Gong playing every day and thriving, and he is at his best against left-handed pitching. And then last name that I'm looking at, $2,700 Mike Moustakas against Scott Feldman. Good lineup spot, and Moustakas has been excellent this year. There's no other way to really put it. And so I don't mind taking him against a subpar pitcher like Feldman for $2,700.
No, I'm with you there. I think he's my favorite cheap option as well. Shortstop today, once again, pretty barren once you get past Troy Tulowitzki. Maybe if Eugenio Suarez is in, he's in an okay spot against the lefty and Rusin. He got the day off yesterday, so you imagine he'll probably be back in the lineup. One guy who's interesting that's cheap if you are going the Dodger route, I don't like Jimmy Rollins, but did get that day off a couple days ago, and since then, he had a double, a homer, and a homer in his last 3 games. So at $2,400, if you're just chasing power against a pretty struggling pitcher, I guess he's an okay tournament option. But for cash games, I think if you're paying down, it's the same option that always seems to be, is Alcides Escobar at $2,500.
Yeah, I mean, Escobar, you get a leadoff hitter, you get a subpar pitcher in Feldman. You got to like that price point for 25. So if you're not paying up, I think that's the route to go. I think you're going to see a lot of people using Ian Desmond today, chasing his hot streak. But AJ Burnett, really tough on righties, does a great job of keeping the ball on the ground. PNC Park, not an easy park to hit home runs in. So if you want to chase that hot streak, go for it. I'm not on that bandwagon. I do like Carlos Correa for $3,900 though. He is my top shortstop option tonight. Like him a little bit better than Tulo. Has a softer matchup facing Danny Duffy as opposed to Johnny Cueto. Again, if Cueto's not right, you certainly do want to have some shares of Tulowitzki in case that Rockies lineup goes off. But in cash games, I'm going to be saving the $600, and I'm going to be sticking Correa in as shortstop. And I think he gives you a nice edge at a position that really isn't good. It's Correa or Escobar in all of my cash games lineups tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think Correa, like you said, makes a great GPP option as well because he's got that upside. All right, outfield options. Johnny Cueto's been very good against left-handed batters so far this season, and that's not to say not to play anyone against him. 233 WOBA allowed, but you're certainly considering guys like Carlos Gonzalez, who are absolutely on fire right now. 2 homers last night, homer the game before that, 4,700. Blackman at 48. And then I'll give you my favorite semi-pricey option. That's Starling Marte against Gio Gonzalez. Not going out of my way to stack a ton of guys against him, but he has struggled with right-handed batters so far this season, allowing a 340 WOBA. And, I mean, Marte's a guy you can play in your cash games, too. I mean, he's a guy that just does it all. He steals bases, he walks, scores runs, he's got power. So I really like him tonight at $3,900.
Yeah, I like his teammate quite a bit as well. $4,800 Andrew McCutchen. He is pricey, and he's not at Coors Field, which should depress his ownership a little bit. And you like to get a superstar like McCutchen when he isn't high owned. So I'm a big McCutchen fan tonight. I also like Gerardo Parra at 3,600, another left-handed batter, going to be hitting leadoff against Ruby De La Rosa, so he's going to be the first one to take advantage of Ruby De La Rosa's struggles with left-handed batters. And Parra should be intimately familiar with Chase Field as a longtime Diamondback. Really good ballpark for offense, so I do like him tonight. And then if you're looking for cheap Coors Field exposure, doesn't get much cheaper than Marlon Byrd at $3,100. Gets to be a righty against Chris Rusin, which I hear is a pretty good thing, since Rusin struggles mightily with right-handed batters. Not a lot of cheap options tonight. It's mostly the middle tier that I'm looking at. Torrey Hunter, $2,800 against CC. Gives you a nice right-handed bat against CC Sabathia, who struggles with them big time. And then Justin Upton back in the lineup last night, $2,700. Not a bad price point for a guy who gets to face David Phelps. And Phelps, no great shakes against, well, anyone. So not a terrible pitcher, but certainly not somebody you go out of your way to avoid. Obviously, you'd like Upton against a lefty better, but I'll take him against a pitcher that doesn't miss a lot of bats, because we know that Upton's got big power, and he's also stolen a number of bases this year. At 17 stolen bases on the year, he can do some damage on the bases as well.
Yeah, I'm on all those guys as well. Like you said, not a whole lot of cheap guys you feel even decent about. The only guy I found at min salary that I think is even kind of playable, and obviously just for GPPs, is Jacob Marisnik at $2,200.
Yep.
Min salary will probably be batting ninth, but we mentioned Duffy's struggles against righties. If you need a min salary guy, he's a guy who's got 13 stolen bases. He's got 5 homers. He's got a little bit of pop in his bat, and he's aggressive on the base pass. So that's the perfect combination for a cheap play in a tournament tonight.
Yeah, and usually you would view hitting ninth as a major drawback, but you get that wraparound effect. So you may lose that plate appearance, but if he does get on, he's got the right guys behind him to drive him in. So that certainly helps offset that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get Jose Altuve against the lefty right behind you. You got to love that.
Yep.
So, all right, that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.